What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 11 Pro Football Focus Show here on RotoGrinders, where you can play whoever you want at any position you want. I am Britt Devine, here with PFF's Ian Hartitz. You can find him on Twitter at iHartitz. That's IHARTITZ. Ian, my dude, what is up? This week we don't have the main quarterbacks, but between injuries and position eligibility and some injury news that's coming. We still don't even know what's going to happen with Devontae Adams as we start this. It's turning into a pretty interesting DFS week.
Yeah, man. Had a game plan coming in this morning, but I'm usually up pretty late Thursday night recording after the game. So I sleep in, I wake up, I check my phone, and okay, everything I thought I knew about the slate has been turned on its head. Because now we got Taysom Hill season, and gonna probably have to start him in all across cash lineups throughout the industry. So it is what it is. We adjust, we move on, just like we have all year. 2020, the year that just keeps on giving in DFS land.
Yeah, you can play him in tight end over on FanDuel if you got your season longs. You can do some weird stuff depending on the sites you're on. It's too late by the time you get this to rush out to your waiver wire and pick them up. Someone else already has. But it's really turning into a very interesting week. And we'll dive into that as we progress through the show. But we always like to start at the top, going over Ian's main article over on PFF, the Mismatch Manifesto, where he goes over a lot of, this versus that, team versus team, and the trenches, pass rates, pace, and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of interesting tidbits you can draw on this for your own DFS lineups throughout the week. So, Ian, let's jump right into this. Let's look at the explosive play rate. These are always nice to get those big chunk plays from your DFS players. What can we look at this week? Any particular games that stand out?
Yeah, just so people know, I'm taking the offense's explosive pass play rate and then adding the defenses as well. So instead of, saying, okay, we got the number 3 ranked offense versus number 25th ranked defense, one-way metrics all the way around. So what this is telling us is that Kirk Cousins is set up to absolutely smash against this Cowboys defense. Will he have the volume? That's kind of the only question. I think we have to answer. But, definitely should be able to make it some big days for Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson alike, as long as they, have at least somewhat of a chance to, clear 5 targets or so. Also seeing Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, and Justin Herbert popping, man. Herbert's the one particularly where we got a Jets defense that has already been pretty rough, but now we look at some of the injuries and things that they're dealing with. It's probably going to be a lesser version of already one of the worst defenses in the league. On the other side of the coin, we got Carson Wentz, Joe Flacco, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Tom Brady could somewhat struggle. Look, man, this was the chart last week that kind of took us to, being willing to take a chance on the Rams defense because Russell Wilson was popping as someone that could struggle. So it's one piece of the puzzle as always, but I will say, Tom Brady against the Rams on Monday night, that looks a little bit more troubling than normal. And, with the Joe Burrow matchup, the more and more I look at it, and we'll get onto it a little bit more in the pressure stats when we get there, but I'm just worried about the Washington football team's chances of potentially just nuking this entire Bengals game plan. We talked about it all year, man. Pressure is the Bengals' kryptonite. Washington can bring it.
Yeah, so you can take a look at this and everything else we're going to discuss over at Pro Football Focus. You do need the Edge subscription to get that, but lots of good articles that Ian puts out, along with just a plethora of just about any statistic you would want to find over there. Let's go down to pace. Getting a lot of plays in a game is something that's extremely important for DFS. What is standing out on the pace matchups this week?
Yeah, had the Cardinals, Seahawks, track meet already go on Thursday night. So now that leaves us with the Cowboys and Vikings as the fastest pace game. We saw the Cowboys start to kind of take their foot off the gas, try some different things after Dalton got hurt. But I think with him back there, for better and for worse, they truly do seem to believe that, they can kind of run their Dak Prescott version of their offense with Andy Dalton. To me, this is more of a positive for the Vikings than anyone on the Cowboys, like the fact that we could see more volume than usual for this passing game purely because of there being a higher chance for overall plays run. I think that's a little bit more enticing than going too much back the ball with this Cowboys team. Because remember, we've seen this offense with Dalton already. With this offensive line they currently have, it's impossible for pretty much anyone to make too much happen there. On the other side, we got the Lions and Panthers, as well as the Dolphins and Broncos really standing out as some of the slower paced matchups. The Dolphins Broncos one, man, particularly, both of us on here, we like to bet the overs. Like, why are we wasting our time with the unders usually? But that Dolphins Broncos game is the one that kind of sticks out to me. Like, I just don't know how we're going to be getting a bunch of points scored. Drew Lock's already banged up. Tua's going across the country. He hasn't been asked to do much already. It's always tough because maybe the Miami and Broncos defense, like, they find a way to score points and all that. But I just don't really see too many total yards being put up by either offense in that one.
You're forgetting the Miami defense scores 2 touchdowns every single week.
Exactly.
You're forgetting that. And you know what? Minnesota, that just means more Dalvin Cook run plays, if you ask me. I don't
Yeah,
know about the passing game. We'll
true.
talk about that as we progress through the show here. What else do you want to look at here? We can look at pressure. Pressure is always something good. That's yards before contact. Let me scroll back up here. You wanted to talk about the Washington defense here. They're really good. And Cincinnati obviously struggles here. That looks like it could be troublesome for Cincinnati. I've got a different play on that on the offensive side for Washington for tournaments that I'll talk about in a little bit here. But what are you seeing in the trenches? Good for defense, bad for quarterbacks.
Yeah, look, the Steelers are they're setting the PFF record right now for pressure rate in a single season. So Jake Luton, good luck, man. I think James Robinson will get his, but otherwise I'm staying away from that Jacksonville offense. Also, Joe Flacco against the Chargers, not looking good. And also Drew Lock against the Dolphins. So those are kind of the matchups we should particularly expect to be tough, in terms of just having time to throw. On the other side of things, we got Aaron Rodgers, Phillip Rivers, and Ben Roethlisberger standing out as guys that should have plenty of time to throw. Now, we see with this, pressure is partly a QB stat, partly an offensive line stat. I mean, it's not like, the Packers or Colts or even the Steelers necessarily boast just the league's far and away best offensive line and pass blocking. These are veteran quarterbacks that know how to get the ball out quickly, know how to take what the defense gives them. So that's kind of why, man, I'm confused why the Colts are as big of they're not huge favorites. I think they're 2-point favorites right now. But even without Devontae Adams, man, I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to move the ball against this defense. And even if it's not, to their usual high standard, I don't know that we can expect the Colts to really have all that much more success than the Packers. So that's an interesting game. I think we'll talk about a little bit more when we get to our best bets.
Let's go down just a little bit and talk about yards before contact. These are the trench battles. This is the Dalvin Cook play of the week for sure, in my opinion. Just stands out about as good as it can possibly get here. What else is interesting? It looks like New England. There's a couple ways you can play that game, in my opinion, from the run game. And then maybe what are a couple run games we want to avoid this week?
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, I did take it, for only running back. So, sometimes these get inflated. The Giants have like the 10th or 11th best offensive line. If you also include the Daniel Jones run, so I had to do something to try to even that out. But Patriots, yeah, man, it's Damian Harris has looked good, but truly the offensive line is just playing, big boy, just physical football lately. So I think we're seeing that kind of mix, and it's worked out so well. So we need to keep an eye on Sony Michel. He's been practicing, but because he's still on the IR, we don't have the daily updates. So if he gets activated on Saturday, that's problematic. But otherwise, we can fire up, Damian Harris as a legit top 20 option at the position. I think a preferred DFS start. And then also, yeah, Dalvin Cook week for sure. Cowboys are on the most yards before contact per rush this season. Also seeing Miles Sanders pop, man. And we'll see what the projected ownership ends up being for him, because no Myles Garrett now in Cleveland. Could be Miles Sanders week. It's another game in Cleveland where it's not going to be ideal weather. I don't think we have as much wind concern as in past weeks, but could certainly still be, a muddy, rainy game out there. And that would seemingly lend itself to more success on the ground. We also have the Falcons popping off as a team that shouldn't have much success. But you know what? Todd Gurley is seemingly just going to be getting 30 to 40 rushing yards and multiple touchdowns per week. So we'll see if he can keep up that sort of touchdown pace. But either way, shouldn't have too much consistent success on the ground. And then finally, the Panthers just aren't looking all that good against the Lions. It's been a situation with Mike Davis where I think it's been a little bit fluky in kind of his just down weeks, but still not the best matchup for him to get back on track necessarily.
Yeah, and it looks like Teddy Bridgewater, he was looking pretty iffy to play. There's some practice reports are coming live right as we're doing the show. They're not giving out hope. He's out there moving around at practice today. We'll see if he plays. Devontae Adams back at practice on Friday. That's a big plus for the Packers. One of the bets I have this week as well. I need him to play for that to count on there. So as any injury news, I wanted to see both of those guys on the field. It looks like they both are going to be there. All right, let's finish this up. Anything else you really want to talk about? EPA, anything else really standing out in your manifesto?
Yeah, last thing with the EPA, we've talked about this throughout the year. We're betting the over for 2 positive teams. Has been pretty solid overall, 35, 29, and 2 on the season. And, the one week that killed us, it was like 1 and 7, was pretty much just that weather week where clearly you shouldn't be betting the overs, when we can't kind of put 25 mile per hour winds into the equation. So again, like everything in this, need to take it as a bit of a grain of salt. It's one piece of the puzzle. But with that said, I think Patriots, Texans, Texans, Falcons, Saints, and depending on Teddy Bridgewater's status, Lions, Panthers stand out as the games I'd be most willing to bet the overs in. So particularly, I mean, that Patriots-Texans game, like I get it. The Patriots passing game has looked kind of up and down throughout the year, but you look at these past 2-3 weeks specifically, they have had a lot more success. And, I'd be shocked if we see Deshaun Watson only lead this offense to 7 points again. So Patriots defense, I think we're still giving them a little too much credit. They've allowed the highest rate of explosive pass plays against this year, not having Stephon Gilmore, having all those front seven COVID opt-outs. They just haven't gelled yet. So I think Cam Newton and Deshaun Watson could be putting up a lot of points this week.
All right. If you want to check this out and anything else over at PFF, go get yourself an Edge subscription and you can get access to that over on PFF. Let's get to the bets. I always like to talk about those, but actually before I get to those, I want to remind everybody the FanDuel single entry series, it's going on over there. One entry, level playing field, 3 different buy-ins, $5, $33, and $100. It is running week 6 through 13, but even if you haven't played it the entire way, 1, it's just a single entry contest anyway. That's pretty good on FanDuel. And 2, if you have played it either once or twice, there is a 6-man final, takes your top 4 combined scores from week 6 to 13. So if you've played it once or twice, don't feel like you don't have a chance. You can still get in there and maybe advance to the final if you put up a couple of good weeks at the end here. So make sure to go check that out over on FanDuel. All right, let's go to our bets the week. Last week, I didn't like the line, so I went with the overs club. I went 1 and 2. I'm looking to bounce back this week. I'm back on basically my tried and true, and that's picking some teams against the spread. My first one is Miami. I know you poo-pooed Tua, not having to go east to west, but newsflash, the Broncos suck and the Dolphins are pretty good. I got this at 3, I believe, on Monday. It's up to 3.5 now. So I like getting that extra hat and, landing right on the 3. That means a lot to me in the betting world to see it move to 3.5, but I still think that's pretty bettable. Drew Lock has some ribs. That Broncos defense got absolutely thrashed by the run game of the Raiders last week. I think they're probably one of the worst teams in the league, and Miami is certainly a top half team in the league. I don't understand why this is just 3.5. Ian, what's your take on that game? I just see this as the Dolphins pretty much just cruising to victory here.
Yeah, it's just how much longer can this defense kind of carry this team? Because Tua, he's 3-0. The guy's been asked to throw the ball more than 30 times in a game yet this season, and he's not really running the ball either. So really out of that offense, I don't think we've seen much to really hang our hat on over the past few weeks. So, when you're facing Drew Lock and the Broncos, I understand how this could be the matchup where the defense just, again, takes over. But I don't know, man. We were hesitant on Justin Herbert on the show last week just because he was traveling across the country, and it did seem like the week, if there was going to be one for a true rookie floor game, I just think, looking at going to Mile High, traveling, from Miami to Denver, and just, again, not really showing us all that much in terms of consistent efficiency so far. It's more of a stay away from me or bet the under.
I hammered that 3, and I'm glad to see it go to 3.5. What's 1 or 2 bets you're looking at this week? I see you got the Lions. There's a lot up in the air in this game.
Exactly.
The Kenny Galladay news, I think, sort of hurts you a little bit.
Galladay news hurts. Knowing Teddy could be back hurts. I mean, when I wrote this down, this was before seeing that Galladay wasn't practicing and that Teddy has a chance. So we'll see on those. But if it is the PJ Walker show, I do think, for the Lions to only be favored by 2.5 is a little bit absurd. Man, I watched every single snap of the XFL. I absolutely love that shit. PJ Walker is the man. But
he was great in the XFL, but that was a bad.
Yeah, come on, man. And even that was a little bit fluky. He was playing in this June Jones up-tempo, wide-open offense. He was the second worst quarterback in the XFL in passer rating when throwing in fewer than 2.5 seconds. All of his big plays were off script, creating with his legs, getting out of the pocket, all things that we saw him try to do in the NFL preseason. It's not like this guy just never had a chance in the NFL. He did. He wasn't good enough. He looked great in the XFL, and he's getting far too much benefit of the doubt, I think. So this Lions team, look, they've been up and down throughout the year, but more weeks than not, they have actually been pretty competitive, just not doing a great job of, holding on to some of these leads. But 2.5 points against a guy that, again, washed out in the NFL before playing well in the XFL. Give me that all day. But yes, depends on how some of those injuries shake out. Also, I like the Washington football team -1. Again, the more I look at this, man, Joe Burrow, I like the guy, but it's just pressure, 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 man. Washington football team can put it on opposing quarterbacks better than almost anyone. They've been a top 10 defense all year in that pressure rate. And credit to Alex Smith, man. I was one of the more critical guys of his performance in the first 2 weeks. But last week, he hit that 4th and 14 to kind of get them down inside the 5-yard line. After that, we saw this passing game actually start to go through Terry McLaurin, go through Cam Sims, go through actual wide receivers that can do good things and not just funneling targets to J.D. McKissick. Once that happened, that's when the comeback happened. It wasn't the situation where it was like, oh, prevent, they just dink and dunk their way down the field, and that's why they got back in it. Alex Smith looked fantastic in those last, I'd say 20, 25 minutes of that game, and that gives me a little more confidence again, and a game that I think the Washington football team defense can dominate. And then finally, the Packers, man, I know we're on the same page here. Mm-hmm. With or without Devontae, obviously having Devontae Adams will help a lot, but seeing this line swing 4.5 points since opening in the Colts direction, like why? I thought
I could not believe the Packers are underdogs in this game. I saw them; they were +2. I went to bet this on Monday. I'm surprised this hasn't swung at all. I mean, I know the Packers struggled against Jacksonville, and the Colts beat the Titans, but the Packers are miles better than the Colts in basically every category on the field, in my opinion.
That's what I'm saying, man. Like, look, the Titans game was probably the best that the Colts have looked all year, and credit to them. But we've seen a lot of examples this year. Whether it was Minshew or Lamar Jackson having a combined, I think, 5 incompletions against these guys. Stafford went for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Mayfield looked like a world beater in the first half. Burrow went for over 300 yards. Like, I think their secondary has oddly still not been tested all that much. They're good, but I don't think they're great enough to stop Aaron Rodgers with or without Devontae Adams. I just think, the defense is okay. I'll give a slight hat tip to the Colts, but I think the Packers offense is worlds better than this Colts offense with or without Devontae Adams. So credit to those guys for figuring it out last week. But yeah, man, give me the Packers all day here.
Yeah, and the Colts, right? AJ Brown drops that basically a surefire touchdown. There's just a lot of fluky stuff.
Changed the game. Yep.
Yeah, I saw that. So I don't know. The Packers plus seems like that's probably the easiest bet of the week for me. If you like parlays, I got one. I mentioned I like the Dolphins. They're a little favorites. The Steelers aren't losing, and it's always tough to think the Chargers aren't losing, but they're playing the Jets. And I know the Jets showed a little bit against the Patriots, but this is a really tough matchup, at least for the passing game. And Michael P. Ryan ain't it on the run game. So if you want to parlay the Steelers, Chargers, and Dolphins, I checked that on the DK Sportsbook. That's plus 136. You get some nice odds on that one. I just don't see how the Steelers or Chargers lose. I like the Dolphins to win pretty easily. Get some money on the money line there. I think you can do that one. I do want to know, so Teddy Bridgewater is questionable. The latest report looks like he moved around decently well in practice. They're going to give him a shot to see if he can actually play on Sunday morning. And it's not official, but I poked around on Twitter, and it looks like Devontae Adams practiced in full. I'm expecting him to play. Hit that Packers bet. So let's go on that one. And that's going to change a lot of things here, because now as we transition into the plays, right? Let's talk. We were thinking we've got a cheap quarterback and we've got a cheap tight end on FanDuel. We've lost DeAndre Swift, who was by far and away going to be the highest owned running back of the week after his big performance. It looks like he's not going to play. So salary, where we're able to spend and where we're able to save has completely changed from basically 24 hours ago. So if you listen to something earlier in the week, you got to kind of change what you're doing here. And I just don't see, on FanDuel, I guess we'll first start on this. Taysom Hill at your tight end position. Super flex, right? We get to do that on FanDuel on the main slate. I'm happy about it. Superflex should be like DFS, fantasy, everything. This should be the standard. I'm glad we get to, try it out on FanDuel this week. Play Taysom Hill. But on DraftKings, he's 4,800. I was talking to Derek Carty. He updated the blitz right before the show. Taysom Hill has either the highest or the second highest projection at the quarterback position. He looks like, Cam Newton, a beefier Cam Newton in the run game. He's still going to be able to pass against Atlanta. How do you not play him at 4,800 now?
Yeah, that's the thing. You just have to. And I think this actually gives us a chance this week. I remember in 2016, team jam them in, Le'Veon Bell and David Johnson every week. Let's get that going with Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook. Let's just jam
I'm souring on Kamara now. I think I'm playing Dalvin Cook. I'm a little sour on Kamara, I think.
I don't know, man. I just think if we get Kamara and Taysom in there, we're getting probably every single touchdown the Saints offense is scoring. I know Latavius is going to be in there chipping in his ways, but it's not like the types of targets Kamara gets should be the easiest thing ever for Taysom Hill to get in there and replace. I'd be far more worried about Michael Thomas and those guys. So we'll play around with them more, but I really like the idea of trying to jam in both those top backs. But yeah, I do think Taysom Hill off 4,800 in cash games, particularly, you just got to go with them there and really not think twice about it. It gets a little more interesting if you want to look at tournaments. This Patriots Texans game again is one that I'm willing to try to take some GPP darts on, because Cam Newton, you can honestly go with him and Jacoby Myers, and you have a good chance of getting every single passing and rushing touchdown for this Patriots offense. And I mean, it's a matchup that really I think sets up the Patriots really well against a defense that just can't stop the run. And even with Bradley Roby projected to shadow Jacoby Myers, that's not a matchup we need to worry about, everybody. And I'm not even hating on Roby per se, but I just don't think that he's the type of guy at this point to really downgrade someone, particularly when we're talking about the sort of targets that Jacoby's seeing. And on the other side of the ball, man, why not Deshaun Watson, Will Fuller, and Brandon Cooks? Again, this is not the same Patriots defense we've seen in past years. They've been the worst defense in the whole league in explosive pass play rate allowed. They just don't have the talent at this point, I think, to make a bunch of big plays when they need to. We saw them do okay against the Ravens, but even then, in a freaking monsoon, Lamar Jackson had his best passing game since week 1. So it's just a game where I think that I'm not sure either defense can slow down the offense, and it's very stackable if you look at both sides. So, not the highest total game on the slate or anything like that. And I think people are still just looking at this Patriots offense as a unit that can't move the ball at all. But, don't be afraid to take a chance. You can even go Cam Newton naked, I think, and look at, just getting back with some of the Texans guys. So a lot of opportunity in that Texans-Patriots game.
Yeah, so I want to talk about, at least for tournaments, the state of NFL DFS this week is we don't have, outside of Lamar, and now we have Taysom Hill, but who are you going to really stack Taysom Hill with? Do you think he's going to throw for 320 yards and 2 touchdowns to Michael Thomas? I don't know. I think that's a difficult task. You can actually get there with the statue quarterbacks, in my opinion, this week. I don't think we're going to need 35 or 40 fantasy points from our quarterback, and that is bringing me to Ben Roethlisberger, who the Steelers have realized they have the best wide receiver crew in the league, and they've also realized that James Conner is total dust and sucks. So even in a very positive game script last week, we saw the Steelers throw 46 times against the Bengals, a team you can run all over at will, and they were just like, nah, Ben's too good, our receivers are too good. And not only was it last week, he's thrown for 40-plus times, 46, 42, and 49 pass attempts in 3 of his last 4 games. They know they are unstoppable on offense. If they just throw the ball at will, Ben Roethlisberger can do that. He can have 303 this week and get you there. He can have 304. I think the Jaguars might pose, also like the Jaguars defense, I think they're going to be missing a couple of their top cornerbacks this week. It's just, he's going to be able to complete passes at will. You've got Claypool, the touchdown threat, Deontay with those short yardage, able to break one long. You've got Juju, who just gets fed targets in that intermediate section, a completely unstoppable passing game. So I'm looking at Ben Roethlisberger as one of my favorite GPP quarterbacks. I haven't used the statue quarterbacks too many times this season, but this is basically the 1 week I think we can get away with it.
Yeah, I've been lower on Roethlisberger kind of throughout the year because we look at what he was doing in the first kind of 8 weeks, and they weren't throwing as much, and he's still averaging, a career low average target depth. But yeah, to your point, I think they've really just realized that the best part of their passing game and just their offense as a whole is this wide receiver group. And I would expect, even in a matchup where, you would think that they could kind of get James Conner back on track, which, hey, maybe as a GPP dart wouldn't be a bad idea to go that angle. But I am with you. I think Roethlisberger will have more than enough pass attempts to meet value here.
All right, I want to switch gears. Let's go to running back. And earlier in the week, right, we were looking at Duke Johnson and DeAndre Swift and a couple other cheap running backs. Now Dalvin Cook is entered because we have Taysom Hill at quarterback. We've got maybe an Adrian Peterson. There's some other cheap running backs there and there. We have the money for Dalvin Cook. How do you not play a guy who has 30 rush attempts in 2 of his last 3 games? This is unheard of in 2020 NFL to see a running back get that many attempts. And when the Vikings get up, what do? They run the ball even more, and you can run all over Dallas. This is about the best possible play you can have, in my opinion. I think of the season at just 9,000 on DraftKings. For some reason, he's 200 less than Kamara. That doesn't make much sense. Even at 10-5 on FanDuel, jam them in. I don't see how this doesn't play out as, a complete and total smash in cash games this week.
Yeah, and I got my working cash lineup. I'm still tinkering throughout the show, and I do think you're probably right that you don't necessarily need to go with Alvin Kamara at that price point, because if you go down, you could even go down like to Derrick Henry or someone that works out okay. But right now, I love the idea of having Dalvin Cook and Duke Johnson in there as cash game targets. Like, I'm not letting last week scare me away from Duke at all. He played more than we were hoping for, man. I was thinking we'd get like the 70% snap rate and he'd still be losing some early down stuff. No, he was out there for 94% of the Texans' offensive snaps. The problem was they were playing in, one of the worst weather games of the season. In that Cleveland game, Deshaun Watson only scored 7 points. So you look at when they played last year against a much better version of the Patriots defense, they really didn't have an answer for Duke Johnson. I mean, he had a nice receiving touchdown. He looked like the true slasher that I think we were expecting him to be last week. So again, I'm not afraid of this Patriots defense this week. I think Duke is far too cheap for an every down back. You can go down to Adrian Peterson at 4K, pretty much a free square. It's going to be getting 15 plus touches, assuming DeAndre Swift is out, but no pass game usage. We know that. I think going with Duke and Dalvin Cook is the way to go. With GPP, I think Miles Sanders is the best GPP play of the week, man. 6,900. Again, we'll see if the ownership catches up to him, but right now, I mean, I'm seeing at least, over the guys at Fantasy Labs, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, and then even a little bit lower, Ezekiel Elliott, projected for higher ownership. So we'll see how that kind of finishes up, because Miles Sanders is another guy that we can expect to be out there more snaps than not. I don't even think Jordan Howard is going to be active. I wouldn't really let that influence anyone too much. If anything, he'll be in that Corey Clement 1, 2, or 3 touch per game type of role. But against this Myles Garrett, Les Brown's defense that already wasn't, a big time fear, love Miles Sanders. And then last one, just Mike Davis, only $100 cheaper. Like Mike Davis in the games this year that he hasn't been playing well in, which has, coincidentally been kind of his last 3 or 4 starts. But you look at those games and they've ran 52, 43, and 47 plays. Usually they're running 60 plus, and like they have averaged 60.2 plays per game. So it wasn't like in these games that, Mike Davis was just losing a ton of work to Curtis Samuel or Trenton Cannon or any of these other guys that got out there. He has continued to be the feature back there. He just hasn't, been in these ideal games. When we say running backs don't matter, it's because they're just more dependent on game script and their teammates than other positions. And now he's in a matchup against the Lions where I know, they're popping out in the Mismatch Manifesto as, maybe not being that great in terms of yards before contact, but we know Mike Davis is always a threat, to rack up those 5+ receptions. And I think if we just get more of a neutral game script where the Panthers are out there for the usual allotment, we can see Mike Davis get back in that RB1 territory.
Yeah, you mentioned Duke Johnson. I pulled up on PFF. I always like these team grades. I don't know, Devin, if you want to bring my screen up here, but you can see Patriots 30th in rush defensive grade as a team throughout the whole season. So it does set up for a nice little bounce back week. And I think in those weather games we've had, you can't believe any statistic from those games, whether it's the run game or the pass game, because obviously you can believe in the snap counts, but teams just, you can't pass. So then they can stop the run very easily. So those games just don't exist to me when I'm looking at statistics and things like that. So that does set up pretty nicely. I want to go to Antonio Gibson. I will bring him up. He is my tournament play of the week. And it sort of goes back to what you said on the battle of the trenches, the offensive line and defensive line, is I think the Washington pass rush could absolutely decimate the Bengals. And what does that set up for? That's shorter fields. That's Antonio Gibson sort of recreating this 20 rush, 128 yards, and a touchdown score like he had against Dallas a couple of weeks ago. So I'm looking at him in tournaments. He's 5,800. We've got him around 10% owned on DraftKings. That's about as low as I really like to go for running backs. I'm not trying to find someone who doesn't really have much of a projected workload. I think he pairs very nicely with the Washington defense in tournaments as a correlative play. That's someone that's really high on my radar for tournaments this weekend.
I think that makes sense. And, you talked to Ron Rivera. Washington has 2 Christian McCaffreys.
Yeah, it must be nice.
Must be nice, Ron.
Let's see here. Anything else at the running back position, or you want to head on to wide receivers?
Let's head on to wide receivers.
All right. So I guess let's talk. A lot of things have changed here. I think we're going to be able to play Devontae Adams. 1, we have the salary, and 2, there's a couple salary saving options now at the wide receiver position. One of them is Jacoby Myers, who looks like he's probably going to be the highest owned receiver on the slate based on everything I'm looking at here. So I got a question for you. What matters most here? Because his individual matchup against Bradley Roby it's not easy. It's not a good matchup in any way, shape, or form. But when you're getting like 45% of the team's targets, what's going to win out here? It's really hard to overlook that. He's priced, I think it's a mistake on DraftKings. What is he, 4,900? He should probably be in the mid to high fives based off his work, if not even a little bit higher here. How are we going to grade this out here? Because it's too, what matters more? Is it the wide receiver cornerback matchup? Is Myers as good? Or is it just Cam's just throwing him the ball every chance he can get?
I've always treated cornerback matchups as a tiebreaker for similarly ranked players. That's not what we're looking at here. I think Jacoby Myers is still a smash at this, valuation because look, since week 7, top 4 targets for the Patriots. James White, 11 targets. Rex Burkhead, 12. Damiere Byrd, 13. Jacoby Myers, 35. Like, he is just being featured so far and away ahead of anyone else in this offense that I'm not worried about the Bradley Roby matchup. And it's not like Roby has just been shutting down every single guy he's faced. Adam Thielen went for 114 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown went for 58 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm not saying Jacoby Myers is as good as either of those guys, but I just think about more than enough volume to make up for him in the spot. And hey, man, maybe we get a passing touchdown out of him again. Truly, I mean, Jacoby Myers, I know that was fluky, and okay, he's probably not going to throw the ball this week, but they're treating him as, kind of their wide receiver that they want to funnel their kind of best design plays to. So even if it's not going to be a passing touchdown every week, a reverse, this or that, the Patriots are treating Jacoby Myers as, honestly, the kind of top playmaker in the wide receiver and tight end core. So I think we got to continue to go back to the well with him there.
All right, let's talk a couple of cheapies. I got one, you got another. I'll let you go first, and then I'll throw my hand to the ring for a cheap wide receiver.
I think Michael Gallup is an option, man, at 3,700. Like, if you just want to help open up even more room and try to get up to multiple of these high-priced guys, I think it makes sense. And look, he has been the featured, third guy with Andy Dalton under center. It's been Amari Cooper, 18 targets, CeeDee Lamb, 18, Zeke, 13, and then Michael Gallup in fourth place at 10. So not ideal, and I understand this Vikings defense does look better. But look, Michael Gallup throughout this whole year, he plays outside receiver. He's got the highest average target depth on the Cowboys. Like, he's like just, kind of a lower expectation Marquise Brown. He's running all these deep routes. They're going to produce a lot of bust games, but at some point we will see a boom. It could happen this week. I don't think the Vikings, cornerbacks necessarily are able to keep up with any of these Cowboys wide receivers. Just a matter of if Andy Dalton and company can get it going. So look, if it was normal expectations for Gallup, in the mid 5,000 range, like he was, for most of the early part of the year, no, we wouldn't be taking a chance because of all the, pitfalls, potentially that could be going to this Cowboys offense. But at 3,700, man, that just seems way too cheap for, again, someone that we know is truly talented. It's just a matter of if his quarterback is able to give him the ball as well as possible. So I think he'd go down there, and then you just have the possibility to get up to your Devontae Adams or even your Terry McLaurin at 6,900, who I think makes a lot of sense as well. Last few points I'd make, Amari Cooper at 5,400, man. Look, like that would be too high for Michael Gallup, but Cooper has been the featured Cowboys receiver with Dak and Dalton under center. So I think, in a matchup that he should be able to win on the outside, 5,400 in tournaments makes a little bit of sense. Also, Tyler Boyd at 5,600. Like, we're talking about this Washington pass rush causing a lot of problems. Well, it's causing a lot of problems. It makes sense that Burrow leans on a slot receiver more than ever in those shallow underneath areas of the field. Credit to the Washington football team defense. They've allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receiver units, but nobody has dropped back more often than Joe Burrow this year. And at this point, Boyd is cemented as number one guy. Last point I'll make, Mike Williams at 5,100, maybe my favorite wide receiver play of the week. I don't think anyone on this Jets defense can guard him. And again, setting up for just an absolute Justin Herbert smash bust. So Mike, Herbert, Keenan Allen, get them all in there. I think if we could see a just massive Chargers explosion.
Yeah, and with the Taysom Hill at 4,800, Herbert was going to be one of the higher owned quarterbacks. He is certainly dropping down the scale in ownership when it all resets. So that'll be a nice little stack. I think Mims is going to be the guy everyone goes to if they're looking for a cheap receiver. He's 3,300. But you mentioned Gallup. Another guy I got out here is KJ Hamler. And I've been playing this, doing DFS for 7, 8, 9 years, right? I'm not OG like a head chopper who was playing before you can even make $100 doing this thing. But I was basically the next wave on that. And I have never seen the amount of no interest in a $3,600 receiver that has 10 targets in back-to-back games like I'm seeing from KJ Hamler this week. He avoids the 2 toughest cornerback matchups on the outside of the Dolphins as well. He gets to run wild in the slot. I don't understand what's going on here. I think Miami crushes this game, which really sets up for Hamler. And he's also went to a near full-time role. He overtook Tim Patrick as sort of the other wide receiver out there. So I think Hamler 3,600 in tournaments is getting completely disrespected after those back-to-back 10-target games. Tough to predict 10 targets, but he certainly has the eye of Drew Lock. And I know Drew Lock is not the greatest quarterback in the history of the NFL, but when you're getting 10 targets in the NFL, it's hard to overlook KJ Hamler. So he's someone I'm looking at in tournaments. So you got to take on that.
Yeah, I love it, man, because Hamler, to this point, I mean, we haven't seen him really bust many big plays, only averaging 11.4 yards per reception. And I don't think he got a ton of hype. One reason, because he didn't go to the combine and kind of put on, just put the number down that we think he's capable of. This is a legit 4.2 40 type of guy. I mean, look, I've watched every Ohio State game over the past, 2 decades. When he ran away from this defense as a freshman, I was like, who the hell is that guy? That guy is now KJ Hamler. Even in this good matchup against the Dolphins, to your point, he will have the better matchup on the inside. And I just think, it's a matter of when, not if, he takes one of these short passes and takes it all the way to the house, because he has that sort of game-breaking speed.
Yeah, so keep an eye on him. There's a lot of good cheap wide receivers this week. I think you can differentiate yourself quite a bit between Gallup.
Which is great. Last week was like the tightest pricing slate of the year. Now we have all the options available.
Jakeem Grant leading the way. I think he's oh no, I had Diggs was my savior at the end there, and then Jakeem Grant held steady for me. So it ended up the cash lines weren't very high last week, so thankfully I was able to get ahead of those. All right, moving to tight end. And, earlier in the week, it was a position I was looking to just play whoever was the cheapest guy I thought could get a couple of targets. But now I have some money, and it's hard to not really look at Mark Andrews anymore because, I think he's the best known quantity out there. He's just 4,900. We saw last week he popped back up to a season high in targets in 9 against the Patriots. We saw Tennessee. I mean, if the Colts are going to score a bunch of points against them, why can't Baltimore? I think Andrews is pretty interesting. A couple other statistics on him. There's no pass rush for Tennessee. They rank 31st in adjusted sack rate. They've allowed the 11th most fantasy points to tight ends. If you go to Gridiron IQ, one of the premium tools here, I don't think I have it up live on the Baltimore section, but I have it up here. Let's see here. I can probably pull it up for some of you guys watching live. If you ever want to check out the premium stuff here behind the paywall, if you've never had it before, we are offering $5 off. It's rotogrinders.com/media/PFF. But I'll give you a quick look here. You go to Baltimore on the passing side. I mean, it's a lot of green. It looks pretty good. There's no pressure. They don't get sacks. They allow a lot of passing yards. The success rate's high. The expected points added on passing plays is good. The Tennessee defense isn't great. Why not Mark Andrews? I think the other guy is probably going to be Dallas Goedert. He's 3,800. What did he have? 7 targets last week, 6 targets. And going up against Cleveland, I think that's pretty reasonable too. But I have this mid-tier. It's a pretty horrible position. I think I'm okay trying to fit Andrews in there this weekend.
Yeah, and again, kind of getting off my original strategy to start the show about jamming in Kamara and Dalvin Cook makes it a lot more feasible to get up to Mark Andrews. Don't forget, man, Nick Boyle was being really annoyingly involved in this offense. I mean, a good player and everything, but just in terms of wanting Andrews to get the most targets possible, removing Boyle from that equation, I think helps a lot. We saw Andrews last week with Boyle, going down, I believe it was in the second quarter, ran a season high 35 routes. So we know he's got the ability. It's just kind of been an up and down passing offense throughout the season. I would also throw out Logan Thomas as someone. I feel like we say his name every week, but he's been consistent. Even with Alex Smith under center now, he's caught at least 3 passes in 4 straight games, scored twice, and gone, for 60 plus yards twice. So, it's just been the most maddening position in fantasy football, I think, this entire season. So I understand it's not the greatest, but if you really want to go the cheapest guy you can feel somewhat okay about, I do think it's Logan Thomas. And yeah, echoing your point, I love Dallas Goedert at 3,800. I was expecting, a really big game from him last week and seeing him maybe get to that 5,000 mark. The fact he's gone backwards is now under 4K. Definitely take advantage of him while his salary remains low. And also TJ Hawkinson at 4,200. If Kenny Galladay is going to be out, man, Hawkinson is going to be one of the more featured guys. We've seen Without Galladay in the lineup, Stafford has had his only 4 games all year without a double-digit average target depth. But even if Galladay remains sidelined, I think we could see him have to be a little more aggressive without DeAndre Swift there to take all those checkdowns. So to me, that means Marvin Jones, TJ Hawkinson, and if Galladay's in, that's fine too. But either way, Hawkinson at 4,200. This is the guy that was the consensus like tight end 2 in the industry, I believe last week with Kelsey on bye. So the fact he's down there that cheap, I think it's just too low.
So for tournaments, one guy I'm interested in, you can, if you think you can get 4 targets at the tight end position, you're probably doing pretty good this week, in my opinion. But one thing I'm doing is, I talked earlier, those win games in Cleveland, you have to disregard anything that happened in those outside of snap rates. Well, speaking of snap rates, Austin Hooper played 85% of the snaps last week. He's back, and against Philadelphia, what's not to like here? Eagles are allowing the 7th highest percent of passes to tight end and the 5th highest success rate on passes to the tight end. And I know you're going to want to run. Philadelphia, they've always been tough against the run generally, but you can run on them this year. And I know Cleveland wants to run. But Austin Hooper, you can't discount enough the win games. He was hurt for a little bit here. You could see him have close to a double-digit target game 1 or 2 more times this season without Odell Beckham in here. Why can't it happen this week? I think he could easily lead all tight ends in scoring, especially if he finds the end zone. So he's someone I'm looking at the tight end position for tournaments.
Yeah, I like that call. I mean, look, all the way back in, was it week 2 or week 3? Tyler Higbee scored 3 touchdowns against this Eagles.
Where did that go?
Where did that go? When did that happen? But yeah, no, I think the Hooper bounce back. It's like the just post hype bounce back, natural.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Anything else you want to do in tournaments, or you want to round this out with some defenses?
We can move on to defenses. I think the cheapest you can go is the Broncos at 2,400. They're home. Mentioned about Tua. Like, I think the way we see the Dolphins winning is their defense dominating. I don't think anyone is coming out here and saying the Dolphins offense, is something that we need to fear at all. Credit to Tua for playing some turnover-free ball so far, but it's easy to play turnover-free ball when you're up multiple scores pretty much the entire time. So Broncos 2,400 at mile high, I think makes sense. The Vikings at 3,300. This is a defense that we were, happily targeting in the beginning of the year. But, Mike Zimmer, I think, has been one of the best overall defensive coaches for the better part of his coaching career. When you look at them since their bye, only 22 points allowed against the Packers, 20 against the Lions, and most recently 13 against the Bears. So, now they're moving out of the NFC North to the NFC East, which is even better for them. So I think, they have more than enough resources to make life difficult for Andy Dalton and company. Maybe, the best middle of both worlds. You don't want to pay up too much. You also don't want to go too cheap. That's the Washington football team defense at 2,900. We've talked about them and their chances, to kind of get after Burrow really for the last hour. And then to your point about Antonio Gibson, perfect and affordable stacking partner there.
Yeah, a couple other ones. The Lions, got to see what happens there. I think we both like that one a little bit. With no CMC, and if PJ Walker does start, that one looks pretty good. You mentioned the Bengals, the Steelers and Chargers. If you can start them, of course you want to use them. They do cost a little bit more. I don't know. I'm not on the Broncos against Tua. They look like they're going to be pretty popular, but I would probably spend up to something like the Washington football team or try to get the Lions instead of. I just think the Broncos defense is so bad. Not something I'm all too interested this week.
Hey, real quick, we just got news that Joe Mixon is ruled out. Mm-hmm. I think we're kind of expecting that, but we didn't talk about Giovanni Bernard at 5,500. Good GPP pivot off of Duke.
Yeah, I think you can do this. Hey, sign me up for some Salvin Ahmed too. I mean, he's getting all the touches. I mean, you can do a lot of.
We got Matt Breida back though. Matt Breida's back. I think it's going to hurt him a little bit.
Maybe a little bit, but I don't expect that too much. The thing I like with Mixon out, and that's what I was expecting, is Mixon runs the ball. Giovanni Bernard does not run the ball. So it's just more pass attempts, more shots for that Washington defense to get some sacks, in my opinion.
True. Like that.
So, all right. I think that's going to about wrap up this show. I believe we will be back on next Friday. Of course, we will have a fewer games to talk about because we have the Thanksgiving slate. So pay attention earlier in the week if you're playing the Thanksgiving slate. I think everybody that plays NFL DFS does. There will be 1 million hours of content about that slate here on RotoGrinders. Make sure to check that out. And then if you're looking for some stuff for the Sunday slate. I think that might start with the PFF show here on Friday. Ian, as always, a blast doing these shows with you. Excited to get into this week 11 slate, making some teams. Thanks to Ian for joining me. Thanks to everybody for watching and listening. With that said, we out you.